Have you had someone question you on your perspective? Were you able to stay neutral or did you get defensive? In today's podcast, I talk with Antony Lo, a physiotherapist down in Australia, also known as the Physio Detective, and we talk about how remaining open in a conversation can help you see what the underlying objective or reasoning is behind someone's words. When we throw out the entirety of a person's experience because we disagree with their terminology or explanation, then we're shutting down the conversation and missing an opportunity to educate and create growth. Hello, friends. This is Lynn Schulte, and you are listening to the Birth Healing Summit podcast. We are here for meaningful conversations that will transform the way you work with pregnant and postpartum clients. Whether it is a new perspective, tool, or technique, you'll be able to implement it into your practice today. I invite you to sit back, listen with an open mind, and grab the golden nugget today's guest has to offer. Now let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Birth Healing Summit podcast. And I have with me today Antony Lo. He is a physiotherapist down in Australia. He is the owner of the Physio Detective and has my PT education online, where you run lots of different online and live in-person classes, really on the female athlete and a couple others. And so Antony is an amazing educator, and I want to welcome you to the episode, Antony. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks very much for having me on.
Okay, so this is what happened, everybody. Antony agreed to interview me for my Birth Healing Summit this year. And after I stopped the recording of the summit, we started continuing our conversation, and I hit the record button again. So this is a continuation of just a casual conversation that Antony and I had, just talking about a bunch of different things. And we kind of agreed that the theme is, how to fight fairly. It's not really a fight that we did, but I think it shows a really beautiful professional conversation and discussion. And Antony really talked a lot about how to respectfully disagree or challenge someone, even. And so I just wanted to make sure that this podcast got out, because I think what we shared was so, so important for people to hear.
Yeah. And it's it's because theoretically, having just one way is not is not enough because we have so much uncertainty. And I find life so much more interesting when I know that there are more possibilities to explore. And I think that's where a lot of my challenge comes from because, like, it has to be at least plausible. And maybe I don't say it that way for these reasons or those reasons, but it doesn't mean that we disagree on the results. We disagree on maybe the reasons why. And just even the word maybe, right? So that comes up later
Yeah.
on in the podcast. But
Yes.
I hope people enjoy it and I hope they let us know what they think in the comments. And take clips and share it and tag us on it. I'm Physio Detective, Lynn, your
Institute for Birth
Institute Birth
Institute.
Healing. Yeah.
Yeah. So here is our conversation.
Thank you.
So I was talking to Michelle Lyons yesterday, and I was trying to figure out what's a good analogy. What's another good analogy of, a body part that might be expanded and not going back down? She's like, well, the rib cage. And I was just like, oh, you're right. We know that women have they can increase their bra size. The number is that the diameter around the rib cage that can increase after birth, and it doesn't always go back. And we also know that women sometimes their pant size increases too. So,
Yeah. And with the rib cage, I tell my postpartum people that, half your ribs are cartilage for a reason because it is that accommodation. It allows the ribs to go in different places because it's softer. Um, but not just that, I've got a friend who, I've been friends with her a long time, and I knew her before she got pregnant. And when I saw her, when I saw her postpartum, I said, you look the same, but you look different. And she said, I am. And her waist size was the same. Her thorax size was the same diameter. Her weight was the same. Her fat distribution, the same. Nothing else had changed. She had 2 inches wider. She went from a 36 waist, like hips, to a 38 hips, and it wasn't fat. She was lean. Her joints had moved and stretched enough that she had now a 38 weight, a 38 hips, and she was still a small waist, and I think she's a 34 in the chest. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So she
yeah,
was like a 34. I think she used to be 26, 36, and now she's, 38.
yeah.
So it's amazing what birth does, right?
Right, but see, I would love to evaluate her and see what I found with the bones because, one of the other patterns I find is what I call a posterior sacrum, and the pelvis just it widens and that sacrum is posterior, and you'll find in those people that their PSISs have 0 mobility, like, they and
She she's got she's got better mobility. She's hypermobile. She
Oh,
has better
okay.
mobility and control. She's got better mobility and control postpartum, I think, than she did antenatally.
Interesting,
I
interesting.
know, right? Like I wonder if that width and the stretch and the positioning and everything, and then just, postpartum, her youngest is like 2 or 3 now, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but this is after her first baby that I saw her. I
Mhm.
wonder if all of that just helped tensioned everything a little bit more for her and she's got that better feedback, right? She
Yeah.
doesn't have the same type of pain as before.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. So like you say also about the abdominal wall, that sometimes that stretch is actually possibly helping things, you know.
Not just possibly, I think that it is helping,
Yeah.
right? It is helping because if you've got a restriction there, you're going to have a smaller, okay, there's no evidence to support the statement, but like, let's just say that you bound yourself during pregnancy, like your uterus can't go anywhere when you're growing the baby. Like the body's going to adapt and you're going to squish it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Right. But then in postpartum, having that, the extended abdominal tissue might be protective of the pelvic
oh
organs
yeah,
to help
yeah.
them in place versus
Well, we know that soon after giving birth, that the pressures that you can generate, intra-abdominal pressures, are relatively low, and they get better every week. They get better, and we also know that diastasis improves every week,
yeah.
and on average, only 40% will have it at about 6 weeks, and about 1/3 will have a diastasis at 12 months. So 2/3 of people are improving in that 12 months.
Right.
But what if in that early 6, 8, 12 weeks, what if that diastasis is slowly coming in, allowing increased pressure? What if that protection especially in those first few weeks, and people say, oh, but you need it for stability. And it's like, do you? Because people get up and they walk. Like, not everybody gets up and walk, but lots of people get up and walk. And if you're talking about stability, walking is one of the hardest things to do stability wise. If you
Yeah.
don't have pelvic stability, if you don't have spinal stability, you ain't walking. So, I think it's fascinating. And I think that diastasis is a positive adaptation to pregnancy. And in the postpartum period, 2/3 of people are just improving over time,
Right.
and
Right.
so many more are improving. I was on a Instagram live earlier. I've seen things 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years postpartum where things just all of a sudden the body just goes, you know what? We're going to change it now. It's like, I don't know what happened. It wasn't me. Like, do you know what I mean? It wasn't
Yeah.
me because they're messaging me going, guess what happened? It's changed. And it's like, what did you do different? Nothing. Are you doing my exercises? No. It's like, I don't know what happened.
Wow. You know,
It's really weird.
it sometimes, I've had clients that especially people who've experienced a traumatic birth, and it's like their body doesn't realize that the baby's out. Like,
Yep.
It's like they're stuck in either the pregnancy or the labor aspect of it, and their body, to me, still feels like it's pregnant.
Interesting. So I obviously wouldn't say it that way. I
Right.
would I would say that the balance of the hormones and the processes and the gut microbiome and all of the interactions with the autonomic system, the central system, the peripheral nervous system, something has changed either environmentally or genetically for the person that has allowed change to occur all of a sudden. And I think one way of describing it is maybe the process is like they're still pregnant, but what triggers that change? And I'm not saying that that's not one possible reason. Of course, it's one possible reason. You're
Right.
using words to describe what you observe, right? Um, but I wonder what's that thing that just, it's like a switch in the brain that changes and the cascade that occurs. I don't think we can, I don't think that's easy to study, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because what is it of the millions of things that it could be?
Well, and especially if someone doesn't know what they did.
Yeah,
It's one
totally.
thing if someone comes in and maybe they do they work with a trauma therapist and they heal trauma or something, right?
Sure,
And the
sure.
body isn't, to me, like the way
Was
my
it a conversation with a friend, even, an
yes,
offhanded
right.
remark that made a change to how they see things, right? Like
That
that, like you
all that
say.
can change
Yeah.
everything that you just
Mm.
talked about, from the autonomic to the central nervous system to everything.
Mm.
And that just goes to show how powerful our thoughts are.
And our words, right?
Yes.
I love
Yeah,
this, right? Like
yeah.
if you're thinking people are weak, they're picking up that message, you
Yes.
know?
Yes, yeah, or
That's,
broken,
yeah, that's why. Or
right?
broken or fragile or,
Yeah, yeah. That's
like that's why
yeah,
strong, capable, adaptable, resilient. Like you just got to
yeah,
keep remembering because you want to put that out there. And it's like, you know
yes.
what? You're not broken. You are strong. You are capable. You are adaptable. You are resilient. So,
Yeah. Well, and that's what I so appreciate about you is us helping us to reframe,
mm,
to look at things, and I'll never forget that interview you did with me one summit, and it was all about just do something differently. And you're just like, what a easy, mind-blowing concept. Like if that doesn't work, do something differently. And I'm sure a lot of us therapists that have heard you over the years, I know I'm using that in my practice and like, okay, well, if you feel that, and the other thing that I've learned from you in one of your early interviews was the whole, when we're dealing with prolapse and when a person is dealing with prolapse and we're trying to help them to understand how to not bear down, that using something intravaginally to help them to get that feedback, I think that's brilliant because how do you change something that you don't know that you're doing? And
yep.
so have
Yep. And
you
you can't go around grabbing your perineum in public all the time, right?
well, and then so many of the times they don't get that symptom, or the result of that pressure till later on, and then they're
Later.
not correlating it, right? And
Yep.
so do you have anything, Anthony, that you give your clients? Because I used to use the Aquaflex,
Yep.
without weight. Is
Yep.
there something on the market that you are aware of that is similar to that? Okay,
No,
I'm
I recommend the Aquaflex without weight,
I can't
or
get it.
a pessary, right? And
Yeah.
there was Vicky. Vicky is on my YouTube channel. Her consult with me is on there, and in an update, which is not on YouTube, but she told me because she thought it was the lifting, the carrying, the weights, the exercise that was making her prolapse symptoms. She realized it's when she's yelling out at the kids, that's when she pops the pessary, right?
I
And it was just a light bulb. It was a light bulb moment for her because how many times are we going to say, you know what? It was the 155-pound deadlift that was doing it. And she goes, I don't feel it after that. It's when she yells, she pops that, she's bearing down so much, she gets the symptoms.
I interviewed Kathy Wallace for one of the summits, and she talked about she had a client that, yelling was her biggest, problem area, And
Yeah.
so I that isn't that mind-blowing that it's that. And
Well, I've had opera singers not be able to sustain their singing postpartum because sometimes there's long passages where they don't get to breathe. And she couldn't finish this phrasing and she was annoyed by it. And changing the pattern of her breathing style and how she generated pressure from below meant that just that little bit of extra volume was allowing her to sustain that phrasing. And she sustained the note at the end, which is like, hey, I've got more. I'm just going to hold the note. Do you know what I mean? Like,
awesome.
yeah, she was happy. And what was really funny that was for a Pilates, because back when I had a different type of clinic, it was for a Pilates class. You had to have a PT assessment so I could tell people what to do, right? And
Yeah.
she said, "Look, I don't need that stuff." And I said, "Look, you got to have it because that's how my setup is. But if you feel like my assessment is not worth it, I'll just give you your money back. I'll do it for free." And then she did that. She sustained her note. She paid her money.
That's all that's all about helping their clients get to the goals that they want, right? Yeah.
Exactly, right?
Oh, it's so key. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Anything else, Anthony, that we should chat about? I love this interaction with you.
I think you're right, Lynn. I like to reframe what people are doing as another way that it might be helping, right?
Yeah.
And so I just believe that you get all of these results. Like there's I would have to be intellectually dishonest to say that you're not getting any of these results. Like I think it's just easier to believe that you get the results, and let's just talk about the reasons why. And I think if we take that approach, um, I think there's a lot more ability to interact in this kind of professional way. I think one of the things that I'm really grateful for is that people will be able to see that how we come from a very different theoretical reasoning as to why we're doing what we're doing, but hearing the changing in the words or hearing that there may be a different reason why, like that, that hopefully has been because instead of people that just agree with you, you get the challenge from me, but you don't feel the threat from me. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas
Well,
I'm sure that you've dealt with plenty of people that are willing to trash what you're doing, right?
I don't know if they're trashing it per se. They're just not jumping on board and seeing it in the way. And what I really appreciate about you, Anthony, and we're talking everybody. Anthony just got done interviewing me for my summit interview. And so on this podcast, this is our continued conversation after that. And so we're talking about what I'm coining the open birthing pattern in the pelvis after birth. And um what I appreciate you about Anthony is that your mind is you have your own unique way of interacting with information. And I have my own experience and way of interacting, and everybody has their own unique way that their brain works. And I so appreciated interviewing Taryn Hullum for the summit this year because I mean she loves diving into the research. And I know you have a very analytical brain to understand and read the research, and Michelle Lyons does too. That is not my gift. I can analyze things, but when you start reading all that statistics and stuff, my brain just shuts down and I'm like, what is this trying to tell me? And it doesn't come easy to me, and it's just not something that I am love to do because I read it and I go, okay, I'm not sure what this is trying to tell me. And as Taryn was explaining in her interview in the summit was that sometimes they kind of skew the results to show what they wanna show, but you've gotta be able to discern and pick out the results and analyze it yourself to make sure that what they're saying is true, and that is just not the way my brain functions, and so that's why Yes, the research is so important and it can so guide us, but we have to know what our strengths are. And my strength is not that. And so I appreciate people who do have that strength and learning from you and taking that information in and helping that to guide my treatments and what I'm doing with my clients. So I just want everybody to understand what our strengths and what our gifts are and own it and know what your weaknesses are and find the support to help you with that. So thank you for all that
Yeah.
you do.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate that you're able to do that and realize that, well, another possible explanation is this, because what's happening is that you're seeing things and they feel exactly like what you're feeling, right?
Yeah.
Like I mentioned the Talberg study in 1998, and like the therapists felt the positional diagnoses and they had, independent agreement on that. And one of them did the technique and the patient felt better. Positional diagnoses changed, um, independently verified, and the 3D X-ray showed there was no change in the position at all of the bones. And it doesn't mean that the person didn't feel better. It doesn't mean that the technique didn't help. It means that they didn't push the bone back into place, is what that means. Like
Or
something else happened that
right.
allowed things to change their tension, and it feels like that bony change is not quite the same. And so, with a sacral sulcus assessment, if you have somebody with unilateral low back pain and they've knocked off one of the sensory, one of the small nerves, like you're going to get a little bit of multifidus wasting. It will test differently because I've seen it, and like you look on MRI or CT and you can see the bony shapes and the sulcus depth is the same. And it's like that felt different, but you can see that there's 25% fat loss on one side. And it's like, maybe I'm feeling that, right?
Right. Right. Well, what I what I understand of the pelvis, it's a shock absorber, right? It translates weight from the legs up into the trunk. And
It's a force transducer, I would say.
okay, thank you. I
Like
like
it changes where the forces are because it
yeah,
takes it from below and puts it up into the
yeah,
trunk, and
right.
it takes from the trunk and distributes it in 3D, depending
Yeah.
on where your legs are, right?
Yes. And so I love what Jerry Hesh talks about the micro movements. And it's possible that the changes that we're making in the pelvis are so minute, but we're changing the micro movements. We're changing the ability of that pelvis to absorb the shock in a way that's not discernible through technology,
Yeah,
or hands. That
maybe. Point 0.1 of a millimeter is really small. Like when I watch people do an SI joint glide, you have to remember that it's 2 to 4 millimeters of glide that you're going to get at the SI, right? So
yeah,
if I'm seeing them bounce like half an inch, you've eaten all of that glide up already. You're moving other things. And so you're assessing more than just a joint glide. Like 2 millimeters is tiny. You've got to get a ruler out. It's like 1/32 of an inch type stuff, right?
yeah,
Like, and so point 0.1 of 1/32 of an inch, it's 1/320th of an inch is the amount of movement that these 3D X-rays can discern. And maybe it's not micro movement, maybe it's alteration of tension and, um, you know, receptors, neural receptors. And like, I think that's much more likely than micro movements. And the change that we get, again, I know Jerry, right? I've met Jerry.
yeah,
The change that we get is not not in dispute with me. I'm sure that he helps lots of people.
yeah,
But if you stick too hard to dogma, then you're going to run the risk of missing out on the reason why that, like the more authentic reasons why. But by having a broader reason why, or
Yeah.
a broader range of reasons why, you're going to have a more a richer practice in helping people because you don't hold on to the theory too hard. I like, what you do works and how you do it works, and what you tell me or other people about why is an opinion. It's not fact, right? Like
True.
until we've got
True.
evidence to
Yeah.
say that that's it.
Right.
Like it's just your opinion why. You're trying to describe why. Like if I don't know, suddenly blow up and get mad out of the blue and you're like, oh, and you tell somebody and it's like, why did he do that? It's like, I don't know why. Maybe he's stressed. Maybe he had a bad day. Maybe he's got a headache. Maybe somebody was yelling at him and I couldn't tell. But see, the more maybe reasons why you have this ability to have a more generous approach to helping the person without, oh, he's just an asshole. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right.
if you're
Right.
stuck on the one reason why, like there's no possibility for improving
Yeah.
or growing through that experience. So yeah, that's what I love about, that's why we talk, right? Like why would I
Yeah.
waste my time on somebody who is rigid and stuck? Like, I've got plenty of people to work on who have rigid and stuck feeling spines. Like why would I do that with a person, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
that's
Yeah.
why I think we have fun, right?
Absolutely. Well, and that we're both open and respectful. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's the key, right? Like, I may not fully agree with you 100% in some things, and you may not with me, but yet we still have a mutual respect for each other and know that we're both just trying to do the best for our clients. And
yeah.
we're really trying to help open the minds of people who are willing to listen to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I at CSM, I spent some time with some people and just getting alongside them, and what they really valued
Yeah,
was that they don't meet many people like me who are able to challenge them without making them feel like they're under attack,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's
I
like, okay. Hmm.
I so appreciated Teresa Wazzer and I got to have a conversation at CSM, and I just love her dearly. And she is,
She's the best.
yeah,
She's
she
so
is,
wise.
yeah, and she was a part of the summit, and she just so sweetly was like, Lynn, I would just really love to know what it is that you're doing. You know? And I was like, okay, I didn't quite understand what she was getting at. I was like, "Well, do you wanna watch me work on someone? Do you wanna have a session with me? Like, what" and she was just like, "No, I'm curious what you're doing." And so we had this most beautiful conversation. And, I was sharing with her that I had another conversation last year at CSM with Ramona Horton, and, I was sharing my, um, uh, frustration is too harsh of a word, but I'm not coming up with another one. Um, with, trying to get this idea into people's minds, and she was like, "Lynn, you don't speak the right language." And
Yep,
and I go, "Okay." And so I took that in and I go, "Okay, I get that." But I walked away with it and I go, "Anthony, I don't talk that language though. That's
I
not
know.
in my wheelhouse." It's just,
Yeah,
and when I go to teach, I teach, mobilize towards the ground, towards the ceiling, towards the head, towards the feet, because
sure.
cephalad and caudad make people have to think too hard. So it's
Yeah,
like I purposely avoid the more challenging word terminology so that people can get out of their head and really be feeling what they're feeling in their hands. And so I was just like, gosh, I don't talk that talk. And I shared that with Teresa. And as I started telling her more of the concepts and what I'm feeling and what I'm finding in the body and the results I'm getting, and she's like, Lynn, I'm not sure. And I love her dearly for this. She's like, Lynn, I'm not sure it's that you don't talk the right language. She goes, maybe there's just not language for what you're experiencing yet.
hmm.
And I was just like, oh, Teresa, I love you.
She's awesome. I love Teresa.
Oh,
I call her Teresa the Wise, right?
yes, yes.
She's so wise.
Absolutely.
And the thing is that It does help. You think about if you go to another country, if you just know a few words, it just eases the way, right? It just
Yes.
eases the way. And I found for myself, because I used to be more abrasive, I'm assuming, because I've had to figure out how to communicate differently.
Yeah.
I find that just number one, acknowledging the results that people get is important. Like it's a, I find that if you go in attacking somebody, they're just going to defend. And nobody learns. I don't learn. They don't learn. If I'm attacking, I'm not learning. I'm not
Yeah.
curious. It's like, I want to kill you. That's what an attack is for. And you're defending, going, you're trying to kill me. I'm going to try to kill you to defend myself. And
Right.
then you end up in these big fights, and it's terrible. Nobody learns, and everybody just gets entertainment from it. It's like, that's not what I want, right? I
Right.
want people to go, you know what, Lynn? I was disappointed that there weren't more fireworks. And it's like, you know what? Mission accomplished, because let's model what professional dialogue and change can look like,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so I found for me that acknowledging the results people get goes a long way. I
Yeah.
found that if you were to ask me what you could do to speak the language a little bit better or whatever, it would be to say maybe, like maybe this is what is happening. And I'm okay if the reasons change. I'm just trying to describe what I'm doing. And I think that's much easier to accept
Yeah.
as somebody who doesn't believe, like, not me, but like if somebody doesn't, they've got a block. They won't even consider looking at some of these things because, that's garbage. The SI is a really stable joint. Yes, it's a very stable joint. Nobody said that it was unstable. I didn't hear you once in that summit talk say that the pelvis is unstable. You never said it once.
Right.
But somehow you're talking about an unstable pelvis now. Do you know what I mean? Like people
Yeah. Yeah.
twist things.
Yeah.
And like that to me is craziness. And instead, being able to say, maybe
Yeah.
this is how it feels to me. It feels like that. It still feels like it's pregnant, or it still feels like they're in labor, or it feels like they're stuck open. And other people are like, that's not possible, Lynn. And just go, everything that you said is out the window now. Like to me, what a waste.
Yeah.
Why not say, I say to my patients, right? I say, tell me what you think is going on. And they go, oh, look, I don't know all the name. I say, stop. It doesn't matter how
Yeah.
crazy it sounds because that's not your job. Your job is to tell me how it feels. And my job is to translate it into medical terminology so that I can write my notes and give a more plausible reason as to what's going on. But I
Yeah.
want you just to use your words to tell me how it feels, and I'll translate what that means, right? Like I've got the technical words for you. And so then I do the same because I believe that, having a professional discussion should be the same as having a discussion with a client or a patient because it's two people having a discussion. Like we're people first, professionals second. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
sure, there's different expectations, but we're dealing with a person first. So being able to get past that, I would say that over the years of our interactions, it's been 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
Um, I would say that you've changed a little bit,
I would say
and
you've changed
that's
too, Anthony.
right,
Yeah,
right,
thank
and
goodness, right? Thank goodness.
right, and that to me is all I need. I just need a feeling that we're on a journey together trying to improve. And for other people, you or I have not changed enough and they'll still write us off because
Right.
we haven't changed enough. Oh, Lynn still says this. Oh, Lynn said this is the worst. That's what a terrible way to say it. She said it was the worst. And it's like, you know what? Lynn's doing her best here. Lynn's got a commitment to change. And just because it's not fast enough for you does not mean that everything that she's done is invalidated because you're not recognizing the effort. Like just because a kid can't run the 100 yards or the 100 meters in 11 seconds yet doesn't mean that they're not worth training. Ah, you can't run, a high school gold medal winning time. Like, why should I bother coaching you? No, you keep working together because we're on a journey together. But, people call me a romantic. They call me a soft touch. They call me a middle of the road, not taking a position. And it's like, you're kidding, aren't you? Like, literally, I take the hardest position. The hardest position to take is in the center where everybody thinks you're not extreme enough. And yet I'm trying to be the voice of reason and moderation and bringing people together. Yes, it's a romantic notion, but you know what? I have less stress in my life because I can speak to different people instead of, there's that Lynn, she's just going to annoy. Do you know what I mean? Like, why
Yes,
would you live your life like that?
right.
Anyway, you got me ranting.
I love it, I love it, because I totally agree with you, Anthony, and it truly is. I've always connection is always my first goal with anyone,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
because you can't get anywhere unless you have that. And so, and that's what I have learned to appreciate, not learned, but I've come to appreciate about you is just really getting beyond anything you say and feeling your huge big heart.
Thanks.
And
Thanks.
yeah,
And, I try to make what I say accurate. I can support most of the things that I say with science. And I tell you if I don't have the science. Like I just say, I've got no evidence to support this.
right.
Like, just little things like that make a difference.
Yeah,
And, and humility, I think, we're on this journey together. I don't have my shit together. I assume you don't have your shit together. So, like, let's just make sure that we take care of other people's shit when they don't know that it's not together. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, I've
yeah,
got your back. I've got your back. I won't throw you under the bus. Do I think some of the things are a little bit off or not quite right? Sure. But like, I assume the same about my stuff too. So it's not
right,
like I'm treating you differently to how I treat myself, even because
right,
I don't even know the things because you can't see your own stuff, right? You can't see your own problems because you think everything is okay with your own stuff. And then it's like, I don't know. I need you to tell me, like, call me out on it.
yeah,
But it's such a weird thing because there's very few educators that like, there's lots of people who will say it. Feel free to challenge me. Feel free to question me. And then you do, and then they go into defense mode and they attack you back. And it's like, that doesn't feel free. That feels like it comes at a cost, right?
right. Yes, yeah,
And
yeah,
so, like, if you genuinely want to grow, you have to take the hits and just like my default is, yeah, that it sounds plausible. Of course, if you say something that's not plausible, it's
yeah,
going to be like, okay, what I hear you trying to say is not that aliens are jumping on my ear and causing my issues, but you feel like I'm not recognizing that there are things happening that I'm not aware of. Like I'm trying to reframe it, right? Like,
right, right, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Well, and, time will continue to challenge us and hopefully maybe even confirm some of the things too, maybe not.
yeah.
Um, and,
Well, here's the thing: the results are there, Lynn. Right? The results are there.
yes,
It's what are the reasons why, and how do we move to a more scientifically plausible explanation as to why, so
yeah,
that we can say to people, when Lynn talks about this open pelvis, what she's describing, and my words for it, is Lynn can feel that there's a difference side to side. Lynn can feel there's a difference in muscular tone. There's a difference in even how the skin feels, not even the stuff underneath it, but even how the skin feels because the nerves are affected. There's a different way of holding your body. You're breathing differently. Your how stress lives in your life in your body is different. And Lynn is picking up on all of that and has recognized that if we can change this to a different type of pattern, and it might be through breathing, it might be through the ribs, it might be through seeing a therapist. It might be through joint mobilizations. It might be through gentle, caring, safe touch. It might be through all of the things that Lynn does to get the change, because ultimately we're trying to find the different that makes a difference,
yeah,
right?
Yes.
And that, at the end of the day, is how I describe what you and I are doing. We're just trying to find that thing that is different that helps them the most, that
Yeah.
makes that difference.
That just warms my heart hearing that, Anthony, and I so appreciate you. And I appreciate you for taking the time to do this podcast with me. And so thank you for that. I love this conversation. I so want to have another one. So we'll get that organized later on. Okay. So thank you for that. And I so appreciate everybody listening into this episode. And we will see you all in the next one. Here's to smoother births and faster recoveries. Take care, everybody. Bye bye. Today's podcast was brought to you by the Institute for Birth Healing. To discover more, visit instituteforbirthhealing.com. To claim $50 off of any online course, use coupon code PODCAST50 at checkout. Till next time, I'm Lynn Schulte, founder of the Institute for Birth Healing.